today's webinar, I'm really excited to be here with Steve from Redgate, and we're going to talk about, so you think you're agile, and specifically when it comes to databases. Today's world is rapidly evolving, and agility and efficiency and software engineering is more crucial than ever. And in some of the interesting studies, the 2023 State of Database survey, it kind of highlights some significant barriers to effective DevOps implementations, and it highlights that a substantial number of professionals struggle with understanding DevOps concepts, or they don't have the skills within their teams, or they're a little bit fearful of disrupting existing workflows. And so we're going to tackle these challenges head on. We're going to pose a series of problems, and we're going to ask some questions along the way. We're going to talk about where the database fits into DevOps automation, as well as automated testing, which is a key part of DevOps automation, so that we're not just quicker at promoting bugs into production. We're promoting working software on top of sophisticated databases that works really well. So I'm excited about this. As we get into it, I'll quickly introduce myself in ClearMeasure. My name is Jeffrey Palermo, and I'm a chief architect at ClearMeasure. And ClearMeasure is a software engineering firm that delivers software projects, but in doing so, helps our clients be really better at software delivery internally. Because none of our clients outsources all of the software. Our clients do software day in and day out, and we focus on the Microsoft space. And that's what we do. And we've been a partner with Redgate for a long time, and so I'm excited to partner with Steve and Redgate. And Steve, I'll let you talk about Redgate for the very few people that actually don't know what it is.
Yeah, hopefully that's true. So I do work for Redgate Software. At Redgate, we've been around 25 years, and we've always been trying to build database software, primarily in the Microsoft space. But in the last couple of years, we've expanded out quite a bit. So the first sentence here kind of says our mission, that we want to build ingeniously simple software to just help you work with databases. So we want to get the most value out of any database platform, in any way that you want to work. And that's SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, even cloud, on-premise, whatever, and with any kind of software. So it's a natural fit with ClearMeasure, who's really helping you build better software.
Awesome. So, and that's Redgate, but you're awesome in and of yourself. We got a special slide for you.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much. So I do work as a DevOps advocate at Redgate, which really means I do a lot of outreach stuff to customers and prospects. I do a lot of pre and post sales. Actually, lately I found, Jeffrey, I'm doing some of your job in that I do a lot of architecture with our sales engineers and reps, trying to help customers find ways to alter their database process, because a lot of them, have ignored it for years and they've struggled. And while they may be agile from your perspective, from my perspective, they're not often very agile, so they've struggled.
Yeah.
But I've been doing this over 30 years. I founded SQL Server Central. I worked with Microsoft Stack for a long time. My contact information is here, so please feel free to reach out to me if you want. And with that, why don't we dig into Agile a little?
Yeah, let's dig in. Let me kind of jump past this slide. So, Agile, big buzzword. Let's just address it really quickly. Over about 2 decades ago, the concept of Agile leadership and kind of what this Agile movement was born, the Agile Manifesto. And by the way, if you haven't read it for yourself, just go to agilemanifesto.org. There's a website that has these values, and it also has another page talking about with 12 principles. Started in 2001, but that's when the Agile Manifesto was published, and it really ushered in what I would say is a transformative era in the software development landscape. It emerged as a reaction to the high failure rate of, at the time, what was called traditional software development processes, which was long, slow batches and phases. And the success of projects, like the resounding success of projects, was really a rarity. And they were often just absolutely plagued by cost overruns that left the project funders, the people that commissioned the project, regretting that they had ever done so. So in the eyes in the eyes of the person that paid the bill, the executive, committee that said we're going to invest in this, it was a failure. They wished they hadn't spent the money because that return on investment equation that they were betting on just didn't pan out. And so the Agile movement, it stood as a response to the prevailing waterfall project management style. And it took really big batch sizes of software delivery, which were sometimes 6 months, 9 months, a year, when big sets of features and changes would move, and then we get some feedback cycles, shrunk it down radically at the time to 1 month. And then some people said, oh, well, let's do 3 weeks, let's do 2 weeks. And now it's really normal for a lot of development teams and businesses kind of be running at a 1 week cycle. And a lot of development teams run at a daily cycle or less than a day cycle. And of course, we hear it, some of the tech startup companies talk about, oh, we run like a 3-minute cycle. We're deploying to production once every 3 minutes. Yes, that's a rarity, and that's just a small, but Agile has changed the way we expect to ship software. And we really, every reasonable executive would expect to be able to ship production software at least weekly, just to keep up with the business. And Agile kind of gave us the mindset to do that, to shrink the delivery and the batch sizes there. And if you're paying attention over the last couple decades, Scrum is probably one of the most popular frameworks, with some templates and tools and ceremonies. And it kind of championed the training mode and certified Scrum Masters, and help teams adapt better. Scrum and Agile leaders could guide their teams to quickly respond to those changing requirements and users' needs. But it's not about a magical framework or certain ceremonies. The big thing that we want to keep in mind, what Agile has done for the software world, is make it where I can I can make a change and deploy a change to downstream environments and productions whenever I want. And I'm not sitting there waiting for things. And so when we think about databases, significant, sophisticated database-driven systems, well, the question is, so you think you're Agile? You're using Agile? Could you say something easy? Could you lengthen a column and deploy your system this afternoon? You think you're Agile as a challenge? What do you think, Steve?
I mean, I could.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
It's a good challenge, right? Like I think, nowadays we talk DevOps, but DevOps is really encompasses what we're trying to do in Agile and Scrum, right? Or whatever methodology you do. And, when I talk to clients a lot, I'm not a speed guy in that I'm not trying to go more releases, right? Like, I don't know what your experience is, but I think 1 week is a really nice cycle in a database world. Whereas certainly there's some .NET or Java developers that daily may make some sense, but it's like you said, I want to be able to release when I need to release, right? It should be very quick for me to make a change if I have to, right? If we uncover a security issue, if we uncover the need to, let's say, Jeffrey, you built something in .NET and we forgot to lengthen the column, I need to be able to do that today. And that's a good test, I think, to see if you could actually do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be this massive change, or adding a nullable column to onto a table. Typically not very disruptive, but can we do it? Are we set up with the processes to do it?
Yeah. Actually, I'll say I've got a friend that they would move to this kind of Agile DevOps way of doing things at their company, and one of the things they did was they would deploy database changes every week, even if they didn't have changes. So he would send a dummy change through, like a stored procedure change that didn't affect anything, but they want to be sure their process always works, that we know inside of 5 minutes, if I had to, I could deploy something to production.
Yeah, absolutely. So along the way, lean software development also came about kind of under the Agile umbrella, and Mary Poppendieck wrote a book called Lean Software Development, taking principles from lean manufacturing and adapting them to software. So I think we might have a few younger professionals on the call. If you aren't aware of that, you might want to go and look that up and just look at that history and how the manufacturing revolution into lean has influenced how we do software, and we've learned from that and brought that over. And Kanban, the Kanban style work tracking boards is kind of a big big result of that. But today we're talking about databases, and ultimately, we're talking to you. If you have a database release cycle of weeks or months, and it's just hard every time, we want you to be able to make changes to your database backed systems and do that in days or hours or minutes. We want it to be a zero friction, no drama, just a normal thing that we do, no stress, no outage windows and telling the customers don't be in the system from this time to this time. We want to take all the drama out of it. And we recognize that there's not as much guidance that's publicly out there as there should be. There's an old quip. This isn't really an old tweet back from 2019. Michael Richardson will give him credit, but the meme is applications with no databases. In the real world, none, 0%. But in articles on deployment patterns and blogs, 100%. All these applications, here's how to use DevOps, and here's the tool, and you go, great. Oh, wait a minute, it's just a website. Oh, that doesn't help me at all.
Yeah.
Because we got to integrate the database. So,
yeah. And I must say, I find that frustrating to see a lot of frameworks and templates that want to show you something, especially for Microsoft, and they don't have a database included. And I get it, right? Because setting up a database is work. It's a non-trivial thing, but as this tweet shows, right, that's just not how the world works.
Yeah, and it's different in a few ways. In the Agile parlance, compute components or things that just do processing, they don't have any state. We can just drop them, destroy them, we can put them back, and that's easy. And that's why I think all the simple and trivial DevOps and automated deployment examples that you find online, they just have the application, oftentimes a web application or a web service, and no database, because that's the easy part. But storage components in general, they're different. They have to preserve data for years. A SQL Server database is one of the really important storage components, but architecturally, think of it similarly to blob storage or file storage. If you have a storage component, you have to preserve that data. You can't just destroy it and put it back. And even a directory structure of files on a disk, that kind of has some of these same architectural tendencies. Your deployment has to cope with the data that's already there, and it's probably been there since before the word DevOps was even coined. And certainly if you have data before 2010, that's definitely true. And when it comes to software, the data is more likely to be the company asset that has executive visibility rather than the code that operates on the data, because that can come and go. And some of this data probably existed many years ago in a file cabinet when the company digitized that type of data. So the data goes way back. And there's a difference between test environments and production environments. Test environments are kind of easier to manage because at certain times you can drop and then recreate the database and do a big load. But you oftentimes can't do that in UAT or staging very easily because you have people who are doing testing that have kind of set things up the way your product, whoever's doing product management, they've set up certain types of profiles and the way your system works. And if their data went away, that is a production database for your product manager. Maybe not all your customers, but for some internal stakeholders, that they have to use that to do their job. And there's a few factors that are the same and different when designing the right deployment process. And so we'll kind of go through those in a little bit. But why do we even do this? Because we need to prevent defects, and specifically defects in the database and defects caused by a mismatch in the configuration of the database and the code that's trying to call and use the database. And so I just want to talk about the huge crippling cost of defects really, really quickly. You've probably heard a defect escaped out into the world is an order of magnitude more than if you find it in development. That is an understatement, okay? There's multiple orders of magnitude here. You have the code in the middle. Think of all these as different layers: code, team, product, and customer. And every shift to the next outermost audience, that's at least an order of magnitude. And about 60% of defects, according to research, and by the way, if you're interested in nerding out on this research, Capers Jones is probably the best publisher of available research, but about 60% of the defects are not just problems with code. It's something else. There's defects in analysis of what the software should do. There's defects in deployment configuration. There's all the problems, or bad things can happen all the time, and only 40% are actually solved by changing some .NET code. All right. So defects can happen everywhere, but a person working, that's at the code level. And when we think we're good, we do a pull request, we share the code with the team, and now all the people on the team have that change. And if we think that that's good, well, then we promote it, we deploy to an environment where somebody outside the development team can use the software system. That's the product level, internally the product level. And then if the product representatives or product management, whoever's doing that at your organization, thinks it's good, well, now we go to production and our customers are using it. But every stage along the way, if we miss something and we promote a bug, we promote a problem, then we have to unwind all of that. If we go all the way out to the customer has to tell our support people, and the support people have to verify that it's not just a training issue, but, oh yeah, there's a problem with the system. And then they have to escalate it back into the team, and the team has to make sure that support didn't just miss something, and that, oh yeah, it's a problem. And what type of problem is it? Can we reproduce it? And if we can't reproduce it, well, shoot, now it just sits there unaddressed, because we're trying to figure, well, shoot, why is it happening in production? It's not even happening in a local environment. And then at the team level, we have to decide, okay, what are we going to do? And now who's going to fix it? And now get back to the code level. So this is more than just one order of magnitude when this happens. So the stakes are pretty high. But let's talk about the different types of data, because when we talk about the tooling, I'm excited, Steve, for you to talk about the capabilities of the Redgate tools, but be mindful of the types of data that go in a database. And these boxes on the screen, let's look at the production box. You've got configuration data, administrative data, and user data. And the schema is the structure that's owned by the software system, implemented in the database, and should be exactly the same in every environment. Every environment should have the exact same database schema. Then there's a group of data that's architecturally kind of part of the schema, and it should also be the same across environments. For example, if you have some standard lists that populate drop-down boxes, like common prefixes, Mr., Mrs., or all of the states in the U.S. If you're U.S. only and you say, you know what, let's just put it in the database. It's constant. This never changes. They're the same in every environment. It doesn't change in production, and there's no screen to change it anyway. All right. Then there's some data that's configuration, and that belongs to the environment itself. Meaning, we're going to put it in the database, but it's owned by the environment, and it can be different in our test automation environment, our user acceptance test environment, and production. And we just chose to put it in the database, but I guess we could put it in an app setting file or an environment variable, but sometimes we choose to put that environment configuration in the database. And that's fine too, and that's different. But it's a different type of data. And then finally, some of the data is administrative data. And without that, the software doesn't do much. For example, a lot of times there is an admin user, or there's some top level customer and account records. Unless we set up one header record first, none of the software comes to life. That tends to happen. And then finally, the rest of the data is user data. It's built up as the users actually use it. So when we think about automation, think about the different groupings that we're dealing with. And the general process that you should go through when deploying is, and I'm going to skip through the continuous integration steps. I'm going to go right to deploying. And some of these words are pretty small. This is only the top third of a DevOps architecture poster. This is the whole thing that you definitely can't read. But if you'd like a high resolution PDF of this, just put that in the chat, and Melanie, who's assisting us with the webinar, she can get that to you. It's really high resolution. It's meant to be printed on 2-foot by 3-foot paper. Like you can take it to a print shop and put it on your wall. But on the deployment side, every software system needs at least 3 environments. You need at least 3. You probably have more than 3, minimum 3, because there's 3 categories of environment. One category is production. Everybody knows production. You need at least 1. Some software systems have multiple productions if you want to, shard things a certain way or divvy up your user groups, but you need at least 1 production environment. Backing off from that, we need some environment where we can do manual testing, where a human can go and check something manually. And common names for this, UAT, staging, testing, whatever you want to call it, but it is the manual testing, manual checking environment. Backing off from that, we need at least 1 environment that can be used for test automation. For this type of environment, it doesn't make any sense for a real person to actually ever use this environment, because when our automated tests are running, it's creating and deleting data all day long, and it's not really usable by a person. It's meant for test automation. And a lot of teams are missing that type of environment, and as such, the quality burden kind of goes on whoever's doing manual testing, and we all know that just doesn't work in real life. So we absolutely need an environment, a fully deployed environment where we can run tests. And then backing up from that, we should definitely have lots of tests that run in our integration build. But for deploying, what works really well together is not the topic of this webinar. Azure pipelines integrated with Octopus Deploy for deploying, running the Redgate tools to go against the database. That's kind of a really good match. It's like a magic combination. And we're going to dive more into what the Redgate tools are doing in this process. And let's dive into data generation. And Steve, you can fill in if I missed something on the previous topic.
No, I think that's great. Like Jeremy, Jeffrey, I still run into customers that develop in production, which is terrifying. But fortunately, I think a lot of customers do have at least 3 environments where they can do stuff. We tend to promote an extra environment because we're data specialists. Even after the manual tests, we often want an environment between that production where we can kind of restore production or at least pull back schema and double check our deployments that they actually go smoothly. But in general, I agree with you with all that. So data generation is an interesting one. Now, I haven't used a lot of code-based generation tools. I've used ORMs a little bit. Jeffrey, I think do you do some of that entity framework code first stuff? Is that a part of?
Yeah, I really like for the integration tests in the continuous integration step for integration build. There's always these tests where we want to answer the question, even before we deploy this, will this code talk appropriately to a database schema with these tables? And those tests are really small. The tables can be absolutely empty in order to run the test. It's just kind of schema validation or entity framework mapping validation. It's generate some data with a library or generate some objects filled with data, throw it at the database through entity framework, which does some insert statements, and then boom, you got a little bit of test data. Yeah,
no, and I think that's good, right? And we went down that route a while ago with tool-based generation. So SQL Data Generator is one of our tools, and it allows you to generate kind of custom configured data that would fit those tables. So, we can do list-based generation. So as you said, right, if I have a list of states, I can populate that out easily every time, or I could populate a list of statuses. But it does a lot of random generation too. So it can look at, a database and go, well, these are numbers, these are strings, right? And these are names, do some guessing there and generate you lots of random data, which is good, but it doesn't always match what you're doing in production. It doesn't always match what your software needs to do. And sometimes you're not getting good tests because you're testing a certain path of things and it's not related to what's in production. I think we see that all the time in code where people write unit tests that say, I'm testing this functionality. But actually, in production, when we get a system together, we'll actually run that code slightly differently. And, the parameters will be different, right? This all comes down to data. As much as I appreciate you software developers, you do amazing work. Data kind of runs the world, right? Everything you pass from, method to method is data, right? Everything that we're passing to and from a store is data, and that's important. So while this has been useful sometimes for just generating a lot of extra data to check load, it's not great necessarily for application testing. And I think on one of the earlier slides, you really highlighted that it's not just that we want quick releases, we want high quality code as well. And that's something I think it's lost in the agile DevOps space, that people, they get pressure to deliver something, they forget about quality. And data is critical for the quality of this stuff. Now, we've seen some people go to synthetic based generation, which overall, as I've worked with some clients, it's not much better than this random generation, because the AI tools don't always know what your workload looks like, what your schema is, for good reason, because we don't want to give them all that data. So it's not necessarily better. But I think if you pop over to the next slide, this is kind of a high level process of what we want to do in those different environments you talked about. So we do want to get realistic data, at least from the perspective of our problem domain, of our application. So if I'm healthcare, I want healthcare data. If I'm US only, I want, addresses and names and things that are US only. But we want to do it in a way that I hope is safe. I don't know. Jeffrey, have you had any clients that have had problems with data breaches or ransomware, things like that?
Yes, both, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me as I talk to more people how often that happens, and we don't hear about it because we only hear about the Microsofts, the Equifaxes, the really large companies. But so many data breaches come out of these dev test environments because they're not secure, and when we've moved data over, that's a problem. So often, what we do want to do is some sort of masking, anonymization, or something else. As you see on the screen, like I've taken Steve with one social security number, a tax ID, and put a different one in there for Jeffrey, because we want to kind of protect that data as much as possible, but we still want it realistic, right? These are the two things we're working with. And then the last one, I think I've been on a quest, or, maybe I'm tilting at windmills at Redgate for the last, 8 years, to say subsetting is crucial. And finally, last year we did release a subsetting tool, but to me, the ability to subset a database creates tremendous agility in my software development process. Because, while developers like to see 1 terabyte, they want to test on all this stuff and make sure their code works. The reality is it slows you down. Every time I query a terabyte, it slows me down. Every time I update anything more than a row, it's slower. And not only is slower, but it uses a lot of resources, which means that my operations infrastructure people don't like to give me multiple copies. We certainly have to work in shared environments. We're slow to refresh. There's just a tremendous amount of things that slow us down. So to me, having this realistic data, making it safe, and then subsetting it are crucial to actually create an agility in your software development process. Now, certainly at some point in time, you do want to test a query against a terabyte database and make sure it still runs appropriately. But that's far after we've built stuff and we've tested it logically, make sure it works. We're happy with it, because often the tuning piece isn't something that I need every developer to do all the time, every day, right? That's later in the process. So we have found at Redgate, as we've worked with so many companies, that getting a smaller version of production down in a safe way to developers, and then to all those intermediate environments, that automated test environment, that QA or UAT environment, that creates tremendous agility. And so this has really been our focus over the last 4 or 5 years, I guess. I was finally glad we did the subsetting thing. We got it working. But this has made a huge difference. Now, by the way, if you don't want to do any of this and you do want to just bring down production data, please just change my name to Jeffrey, and then I don't care what you do, really. Like, I'm fine with that. Jeffrey, are you fine with that?
Go for it. The word subsetting, that I just want to call out a little bit of jargon for the developers out there that might not be just familiar with that term and with a good software example of that. Um, Most databases are not designed to be absolutely global in nature for everybody. And one of our clients, we have full permission to talk in detail about, is a nationwide county fair software package. And part of that is auctions and prizes and blue ribbons and all this stuff. And the natural the natural segmentation is, what fair is it? Because yes, we could have an entry or award table that has a bunch of records, but every time we query it, we're adding a where statement because I'm filtering by that particular fair. I'm just never not doing that. And so if I pull back some data into a test environment, I can exercise absolutely every function of the software, but only pull back data for one fair. And so I get a subset of every individual table that kind of rolls up to the fair, record that's at the top. And most databases have some type of natural chain of foreign keys that lets you, subset it by a particular account or customer or region or something.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I might take issue with most databases. Like I find a lack of foreign keys very common, and I actually find a lot of broken code in production, which is amazing to me in a database. But the example I always use, Jeffrey, is I worked for a accounting firm at one point, and we were building software to handle transactions, sales and expenses and all that kind of stuff. And as we were doing it, we're gathering these requirements, and the head of the department actually came and said, "Listen, there's really 12 types of transactions that we have to cover that they have to work. So if, we get a normal sale, we have a split sale, we have all these things." He goes, "It's really those 12 things I need to solve." And so that helped us because we realized we could just build a data set of, dozens of rows that handled those 12 types of transactions and test things very quickly, right? We can run lots of queries. We can actually, as humans, add up numbers in dozens of rows and go, does this work correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that I've seen often in production where people, run a query across a million rows, they get a number and they go, it's roughly good. And then they ask the business people and they go, yeah, that looks about right. Like it's about 1.2 million. But a lot of times I've found in actual clients, they've got calculation errors that have lived there for years that nobody pays attention to. And as a matter of fact, we have a friend that we were talking yesterday. They have a sales commission system, and he was like, if we find a bug that the sales commissions are too low, they wait if the salespeople catch it, like which is not is a moral problem, but
Yeah.
the salespeople are pretty good about they catch it quickly. You calculated my commission incorrectly. But if they don't catch a bug and it's too high, the salespeople will never tell them,
Of course not.
right? That's a problem that we see in software all the time. Those types of issues because we work with too big data sets, we don't understand them, and then we don't really test appropriately to evaluate whether or not our software does what we think it'll do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real problem. So actually, let's flip to the next slide. And so Redgate, we released Test Data Manager last year, which is kind of a 2.0 version of this entire process, where we were trying to find ways to not only meet the needs of our customers, but do it in a simple way. So we've had some products that do this for a while. There are other vendors that do this stuff, but it's been really heavyweight. And so a lot of software shops have avoided actually doing this. And certainly in the US, I think we've ignored the PII data classification sensitivity thing very well. But even overseas, we've got customers that have struggled with that, even though they know it's important. So what we've tried to do is look at this from the perspective of both the developer, the dev test people that need to get data, and then the data operations people that, could be DBAs, could be sysadmins, but they are responsible for somehow getting us data in some way. And so at a high level, what you really want to do is you want to understand where I have sensitive data. At least I hope you do. certainly if you're regulated, you should do that because you don't want to mask all data. We don't want to change all data because it just takes too many resources, right? And ultimately, we're trying to save time here. That's right. Jeffrey's whole point, what he helps you do is save time by being agile and get things done sooner. So we want to classify that data. And then what we want to do is somehow kind of mask and hide that data in a way that keeps it safe. But we want to keep a similar skew and distribution of data so that it looks like something in production. So we're still solving the same problems we would want to solve. So in the fair example, we know we have prizes. We have to have rules about how you win a prize. We have to have a way to enter. We have to have a way to, decide who wins them. There's all these things we need to solve, and we need that set of data in a safe way. And then to optimize that, this part of this optimize is really about subsetting and saying, let's only take a representative set of data and use that to do all of our dev test work. Okay. Now, we still may need a full-size copy for performance load testing, but honestly, I've been doing this 30 years. Almost nobody does full-size load testing. And if they do, they do it very rarely. Mm-hmm. So honestly, the best thing I've seen for agility is get a good represent subset of data and use it for developers, use it for CI, use it in QA. So that way we have the same data set and we can reproduce problems, right? So when QA finds a problem, developers can reproduce it and we understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. If we happen to have a bug that we can't reproduce from production, then what we should do is bring down another very small slice of data that represents that problem or that bug. And from there we go. The other thing we've done a lot, so Jeffrey, you're a .NET developer, right? You're a C# MVP, is that right?
Yes.
Or ASP, right? Like you do that stuff. So imagine if I told you that we're going to work on this application together, okay? And we're going to take these text files with C# in them, and we're going to stick them on Google Drive, and you and I are going to edit them together at the same time. Would you like that?
Not unless we were on a Zoom call together.
We'd be hopefully then still only one of us is typing, right? Like we're pair programming both.
Typing. We can't edit the same line at the same time.
Right. Or even potentially, different parts of the same method, right? Or you don't want me changing properties when you're editing a method that might look at those. Right.
Merge conflict.
But it wouldn't be a merge conflict, right? Because we'd be compiling code and we may or may not get a compilation error, or we may or may not get a problem, right? And to me, when I talk to developers about doing this, they all think that would be insane. Like we would never co-program on the same file. But in databases, we do that all the time.
Yeah.
And I see some customers, especially those that don't have great communication habits. Person A is changing a table and a view and a stored procedure. Person B is editing that stored procedure for a different reason. And they waste time because they keep changing logic. One of them's like, well, it's not working. And they hit compile again. And then the first person is like, well, now you broke mine. So they hit compile. And they just go back and forth because they don't realize. So we've always tried to get people to do dedicated databases for each developer, right? But looking the same in CI. We've moved to an area of doing cloning, which is really a separate copy of database without all the resources involved. And essentially, you can think of it, well, we actually do with containers, but you can think of it as we create a read-only image of the database, and then we give a read-write copy as a container to each developer. So they all can work independently, but we've only really got one copy of that database, right? And potentially that same copy, read-only copy, is used for CI, it's used for QA and everywhere else, which really helps us with resource usage. It helps us with agility because we only produce one of these things and then deploy it out to many people. And it helps us with consistency because now if I have a problem, I can approach you and say, hey, I've got this problem. Here's what's happening. On your copy of the database, you can reproduce that. And then we can decide, how do we solve a problem? What code do we want to write, or what changes do we need to make? And there's a lot more to all doing this, but at the high level, being able to take a subset of data out of production, make it safe, and then deploy it to each developer independently is a tremendous boon for agility.
And without this, also practices like feature branches just are not feasible when you still have a global dependency, like a certain test set of data that somebody's just manually procuring, or
Absolutely. Right.
because
Like, right.
when
And
I
you're
have a
right. What if I want to link the column in a feature branch? If I
yeah
do that on the same database you're using, I might mess up how your application works.
yeah if we're sharing that database, but if I'm in a branch, I need a branch is a completely segment of isolation.
Yes.
And if I'm using a shared team database server and I have to go to that database server to do my column extension, well, that doesn't work because now I'm instantly breaking somebody else. I need to be able to on the branch run my private build and have it spin up the application and my local database with the particular subset of data for a development level database and go to town locally, not messing with anybody else. And once I'm satisfied that, okay, I extended that column, the code that relies on that table and column, that code is happy. Now I'm submitting a pull request back to my team. I'm submitting a pull request with the application change and the database schema change together.
Yes. And, and Jeffrey, you've been doing this a long time, like I have. Uh, Maybe more often than not, what I really want to do is be able to throw that branch away because I messed stuff up and start
Yeah.
over. Right. And I should be able to throw a database away and restart over because, I've made 12 changes. I lengthened 3 columns. I changed the views. I'm like, you know what? That was a bad idea. Let's try something else. All
Right.
right. And doing that on a database that you care about and undoing all that work is really hard. It's really hard. And it's time consuming.
We often think about feature development and the workflows necessary to do feature development, but there's also a workflow for debugging. Now, of
Yeah.
course, we want to all tell ourselves, no, we don't ship bugs. We just don't have bugs. That's not really a problem. But if we don't have a process to be super quick about investigating and fixing bugs, then when it happens, we're not going to serve our customers very well. And you mentioned having these subsets just ready. One example that happens all the time is some customer reports a problem. We go back or whoever is working with them goes to the UAT or the staging environment and says, well, it seems to work here. Maybe in production, hopefully we have some way to do enough level of pseudo impersonation to where we can get the customer's experience of what's really happening.
Uh,
And if we can see on production, or let's say we do screen share with the customer, yeah, I can see that. I click on that screen, it just sits there. What's it doing? Or
right.
here's an error happening. Well, now we know that there's an error, but there's no error in UAT or staging, which might have a big old database, but for some reason or another, no problem. That means that there's not an error in the functional code. There's an environmental difference that's causing the code to behave differently. That some assumption that we have is not working out with the shape of the data, and with this tool and with subsetting, we can specify that customer's tree of data, and we can create an image with the masking rules for that particular customer, and of course all the records that hang off of that. We can desensitize them, and then we can have a set of data that is exactly the same shape as that customer has in production, but desensitize everything that identifies that customer. And now if I have to debug it, I can clone that onto my own computer if it's not massive, or onto a appropriate database server that I'm using. And now I can run the code. I can use the debugger if I need to. I can see what's going on, because oftentimes, especially using Entity Framework and OR mappers, we in development, we kind of make assumptions. We do testing where there's a one-to-many or a collection relationship, and it works fine with 100 records. Heck, it works fine with 10,000 records. Ooh, but that customer in production, somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they got 3 million records in that table that were doing a collection relationship. Okay, we didn't expect that. They're the only customer that somehow ended up in that spot. And guess what? The mapping and the queries that are being generated to handle that parent-child relationship, not going to work. So now we're able to reproduce that bug. And now once we reproduced it, Easy fix.
Right. Right. No, and that's exactly right. Like there's often customers get the most amazing data into production databases, and I don't know how they do it, but they come up with things that we never think of in development. And so you're right. We have to have a way to reproduce that quickly and easily to solve problems.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on here before we?
No, I would say, like this is like a 2.0 product of all these technologies we're putting together, but there's the subsetter is new and we're still evolving and changing and stuff. So anybody that is interested, we'd love to talk with you about how it works. And we'd love to know if we're meeting your needs or not, because we do a ton of research at Redgate. And so we're always trying to understand what we do to solve customers' problems. We operate a subscription now, so we're not selling you software and walking away. We are now partners that I have to prove value every year. So we really want to work closely with you.
Yeah. I want to make one point on the previous slide around the data generator. I love this approach, and with production databases that have been in production for a long time, you absolutely need the cloning and the masking all day long. But there's a lot of legacy modernizations where new things are being built, and there's a lot of net new development going on. And there's a lot of scenarios where, hey, that production database just is not really out there to know. I mean, or maybe it's just, hey, we got a new module that we're adding to the software system, and so there's, I don't know, 10 new tables that we're adding that just don't have that accumulated use. And SQL Data Generator really comes through. And one example, let's say that we got great test coverage and unit tests and component level integration tests for our mappings and even full system tests, and they all run fast and it's all great because the databases are really small. And with SQL Data Generator, one really good practice is to just give the task to somebody on your team with really good analysis skills and have them just create a profile in the tool to generate just a whole bunch of data for every table in your database and load that sucker up and see if your full system tests still work just fine with a database that didn't start as empty. Like load it up almost to an absurd level and see which scenarios your application just grinds to a halt. Guaranteed, if you haven't done it yet, there will be at least one.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like I do that all the time. Like I add my 10 rows of data that I'm trying to play with, and then I'll say to SQL Data, give me a million more rows so I can see if this still works. And I'll do things like, do nulls, do negatives, right? Add things I don't expect because I'm just curious, will the software still work, right?
Yeah, totally. So I just wanted to add that. All right, as we close up, for Clear Measure, we like Redgate because in the SQL Server space, Redgate is best of breed. I mean, there's really not a comparison. I mean, so there's not really a good list of substitute products. Yes, you can substitute a product, but you're just going to be hand rolling so much. You're going to be doing so much work. And so some of the things that we really help with is your database DevOps inspection. If you already have some automation, if you already have an environment, we inspect these all day long. We'll do audits and we'll give you a set of recommendations for improving things. Or if you know that, hey, something's not working right and you want us to come take a look, we do that all the time. We have advisement retainers, architect retainers, and also for full system, clients tend to come with us with a software project that's not quite going the way that they want, and they know that there's something within the development team. It's not just about figuring out what the market wants. It's somewhere in the engineering team, and it needs to be turned around. We do those, and we also do full software project delivery. If you're looking for who you want to do a project, and you tend to do that, we love doing those too. So we'll leave a link at the end. That's what we can offer, and
at Redgate, we obviously, right, we're selling software subscriptions to you and we want to work with you, but we do a lot of community support and education. And Jeffrey didn't say it, but Clear Measure has been doing a lot of educational stuff like this over the years. And before the pandemic, Jeffrey used to run a conference down there. I've been down there to speak for him, and I've watched him deliver all sorts of stuff to help you just get better. Right now, if you need extensive extensive work, you got to pay him, right? Like you got to pay him, but he gives away a lot for free, and we do at Redgate as well. So we did his tour last year all around the U.S. Talking about DevOps for databases and not only what we do, but just at a general level, how can you be better? And we're doing it again this year. So this year, our theme is Flyway, and we're doing DevOps Airways. So look for those at cities all around the country, even some overseas. I don't know if we're coming to Austin, Jeffrey, but I'd love to see you somewhere. Or if you do your conference again, I'd love to come down and hang out.
We need to do that again. It's been, yeah.
Years.
Well, yeah, everybody's jumbled up the last 4 years. We need to get back into that. So,
yeah, one of these days.
And so close out. If anyone just doesn't even know where to start and thinking, yeah, okay, there's something here. Do an automated online assessment, and you'll get an immediate score. And of course, there's an opportunity for you to say, hey, I'd like to talk to somebody at ClearMeasure and figure out what to do. And that's fine. If you come and say, hey, doc, it hurts right here. I don't know what we should do, but it hurts right here. Hey, that's cool. That's perfectly fine. So, Steve, I had fun. This is fun. I love talking about this with you. And I learned when you're talking, I learned from you. That's great.
Yeah, no, I think we always learn from each other. Like I've watched you do these over the years on all sorts of architecture, agile, DevOps, different things. And no, same thing. I appreciate you having me, and I enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right. So I think we had a good number of people requesting the poster, and Melanie was answering questions in the chat. So fantastic. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. We'll respect your time and get you on with your day. And so until next time, keep on shipping awesome software and databases. Have a good day.